The competition between China and the US is essentially a structural conflict that can't be completely resolved. Even if any agreement is reached, it would only temporarily delay the outbreak of problems, not cure them at the root. This phenomenon, can actually be traced back to the classic Thucydides Trap. The Thucydides Trap was proposed by a Harvard University professor, Allison. The concept was put forward by Graham Allison. He drew on the observations of the Greek historian Thucydides in the history of the Peloponnesian War. Every rising great power will have a second strongest power trying to challenge the existing hegemon. The chance of war between the two sides is as high as 75%. Historically, this type of conflict from power shifts between great powers is almost inevitable and has never been truly resolved or permanently settled. For example, the most classic case in ancient Greece was the Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta. Athens, as a democratic, commerce-driven maritime power, was similar to the United States today. It rose to power through an innovative economy and a global trade network. Sparta, on the other hand, was like China, a land-based military superpower that emphasized discipline, centralization, and military might. The two sides clashed on different fronts, each winning and losing in turn. At sea, Athens' navy once held the advantage, but on land, Sparta's infantry phalanx was unbeatable. In the end, Sparta besieged Athens in 404 BC, forcing it to surrender. This war not only destroyed Athens' prosperity, but also led to decades of decline for the entire Greek world, highlighting the devastating consequences of a shift in power. This kind of historical pattern has reignited in modern times, like how the British Empire, on which the sun never set, was replaced by the United States. Germany's rise challenged Britain's dominance, and Japan challenged the United States, which led to the Pearl Harbor incident in World War II. The competition between China and the US is following the same logic. America, as the current hegemon, is now facing China's rise in both economy and technology. The frictions between the two sides in the South China Sea, the Taiwan Strait, and the global supply chain are a modern variation of this trap. The current situation between China and the US will inevitably evolve into confrontation or even war, but this won't happen overnight. It will go through several stages first. The decline of a great power often starts with internal division, letting the second strongest country catch up. The Roman Empire fell from corruption, stagnation, and warlords taking territories, letting tribal groups take advantage. Similarly, today's extreme polarization in the United States, the division among voters and the debt crisis, with federal debt now exceeding $35 trillion, are undermining its global leadership, allowing China to accelerate and overtake in areas like electric vehicles, 6G, and quantum computing. With this internal division, the second strongest nation may get a brief respite, as the hegemon must handle its own conflicts. This often causes political purges and factional struggles, which further weaken its competitiveness. Take Trump as an example. His election stemmed from internal contradictions in the United States. For the domestic elite, media, and deep state, he was the main threat, not outside forces like China. In fact, Trump's priority was to consolidate power and remove dissenters. With impeachment investigations and FBI actions, he was motivated to make temporary compromises with China to avoid conflicts on multiple fronts. Rumors about China interfering in US elections are exaggerated. While China does intelligence work, its influence is less than US political parties. For example, The controversies surrounding the 2020 election mainly stemmed from internal accusations rather than foreign interference. Trump might have relaxed some policies during trade negotiations or temporarily eased the chip ban on Huawei, or even slowed down the crackdown on TikTok to buy time, but he faced resistance from the domestic anti-China hardliners, the so-called Dragon Slayers. People like Senator Marco Rubio and former FBI official Chris Wray see China as an existential threat, worrying that China might overtake the US in AI and semiconductor fields. They will keep up the pressure, forcing Trump to waver between relaxing and tightening policies. On the other hand, China is extremely dissatisfied with the current situation and refuses to be led around by the US. They hope that Trump will relax technology export controls all at once. They demand commitment to the One China principle and opposition to Taiwan independence. This is not economic. China must mobilize resources for innovation, but still relies on the US for talent, materials, and technology. Achieving breakthroughs in the AI era is a strategic bottom line. Xi Jinping cannot afford delays as China holds the rare earth card. 90% of rare earths come from China. If China imposes an embargo now, it would hurt the US defense sector and EV battery chain, but only until the US finishes its supply chain shift. So, China might press hard right before the US midterm elections to force Trump to give in. If negotiations fail, the consequences would be severe. The first risk is that if China bans rare earth exports, the US military industry could halt. For example, a shortage of rare earth magnets for missile systems and radars could delay production and affect global arms sales. The second risk is US countermeasures, like freezing Chinese bank assets or excluding Huawei Pay from SWIFT. China's industry relies on US ethanol exports for 60% of its supply. This could trigger a supply chain breakdown, putting China's solar panel and wind power industries at risk. What's worse, if Trump impulsively imposes additional tariffs, say, another 25% on top of existing tariffs, the market could experience extreme volatility, and the stock market might drop by 20% or more, just like during the 2018 trade war. The index could drop about 10%. China won't back down. This is their last stand, with no way out. What worries me is that neither side can stall, and things could escalate into a limited skirmish before the 2026 US midterms, with America possibly launching targeted sanctions. China will hold firm on its bottom line and may restrict rare earth supplies. This could cause military friction in the South China Sea or over Taiwan. In the short term, I advise investors to be cautious, as recovery is fragile, and if the trade war flares up again, a 20% correction in the stock market is possible. In the long run, if Trump returns to power, he will push for a comprehensive approach. But the next few months will be a critical window. Whether things will ease or escalate into a showdown will determine the direction of the global landscape. History teaches us that the way out of the Thucydides Trap is often not wise diplomacy, but devastating war. Can we break this cycle? It's something worth pondering.
Please subscribe and follow New York Daddy Investment.